Facebook declares Kyle Rittenhouse guilty of mass murder. Facebook and Twitter have made the judicial decision to declare Kyle Rittenhouse, the 17-year-old who was seen in various videos around Kenosha, Wisconsin, administering first aid to the protesters, putting out dumpster fires as they pushed the dumpster, lighted on fire, towards a gas station. That couldn't possibly be hazardous, could it? And who was then engaged in a shooting that killed 2 people as he was seen running away from them and being attacked. For merely stating her opinion, Kyle Rittenhouse has done nothing wrong. Journalist Cassandra Fairbanks received a suspension from Twitter. The reason? The company is claiming that such a post glorifies violence, thus going against Twitter's terms of service. I don't understand that. I don't understand how. What, we're not allowed to have an opinion that goes against the social media giants of today? Meanwhile, Facebook has decided to delete any post or potentially remove permanently, aka ban, anybody who posts in favor of Kyle. They've decided that he's already committed mass murder without a trial. George Orwell's 1984 dystopian future is already upon us. We dare not utter an opinion contrary to the Ministry of Information in the public square that Facebook has become. The fact that Facebook is declaring this a mass murder, first of all, seems to me a long shot conviction considering the evidence that we've seen, and the fact that even the leftist New York Times went through a timeline of events and states that Rittenhouse was fleeing attackers and acting in self-defense. This is coming from a leftist organization who continually declare that the looting, the murder, and the mayhem from around the United States are stemming from mostly peaceful protests. And yet, they declare Kyle as acting in self-defense. One time, let's consider the source. When asked, Kyle's lawyer, John Pierce, stated they can no longer pretend to be neutral internet computer service providers protected from defamation claims by Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. They have now stepped in the arena and are publishers. Myself and Lynn Wood intend to hold Twitter fully liable to Nicholas Sandmann, Kyle Rittenhouse, and every other person whose life it has tried to destroy simply because it disagrees with their political viewpoints. I think that we can all agree that by denying voices of dissent against Kyle having committed mass murder or having done anything wrong, it will skew the conversation in one direction and one direction only, as leftists will be able to call it falsely and without any pushback a mass murderer, as that, of course, meets the approval of Facebook's editorial staff. Of course, when faced with the onslaught of propaganda, all but the strongest minds will be able to resist deciding, evidence be damned, in going along with the madness of the crowd. And thus, Facebook is positively complicit with the gaming of the system towards the radicalization towards the left-hand side of the aisle. And the challenge is, because we cannot openly discuss these things, because there will be no pushback, the advancing leftist hysteria is being seeded, nurtured, fertilized, and watered by these leftist conforming social media companies. There will be a reaction from the right. See, we use free speech, the bedrock of our democracy, protected under the Constitution of the United States and our blessed First Amendment, to settle our differences peacefully, using discussion instead of violence. When one side is able to propagandize and the other isn't, this infiltrates the minds of various people, and it cannot help but polarize our society to an even greater degree than it already is, and it's already pretty bad. It's not a single instance that pushes us into polarized madness and a potential hot civil war, but a series of events which compound one on top of the other. And Facebook right now is absolutely adding their great and considerable leverage behind these mechanisms. Worst of all, due process is another founding principle of our country, the presumption of innocence. Facebook is essentially stating that Rittenhouse is guilty and describing him as a mass murderer. The odds of Kyle Rittenhouse being found guilty in a court of law are very, very low. And the companies, these social media giants, are going to be sued for millions and millions of dollars by Lin Wood, his lawyer, who, by the way, successfully represented the Covington kids in their cases against the biased and lying media, given their narrative that it was the Covington kids, Nick Sandman, who was the aggressor against Nathan Phillips, the Indian man, who in fact approached them and beat his drum in their face. It's my belief that these social media companies have far too much power over public discourse. And I say that as an owner of Facebook shares. And I think that regulations must be put into place that editorializing of content cannot and should not happen unless they are violative of US law. There will be no good that will come to these barriers of expression and free speech. The question that I have is, do we, as citizens of the greatest country of the world, stand by and get slowly cooked like a frog simmering in a pot on the stove? Or do we stand unified in favor of free speech and prevent the leftist narrative that they are trying to usher in, like a dark curtain over our collective minds, preventing us from seeing the sun of liberty, which we have freed from the hands of tyranny over centuries of enslavement, of wars, and death of many. Stand up for our freedoms. Stand up against the social media giants' tyranny and the suppression of speech. If you're new to this channel, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and if you like this, share it and leave me a comment with your thoughts on the subject. Peace and blessings to everybody out there. Have a fantastic day.